Hi, excursionists. It's me, Nari. First off, an apology. I know it has been several weeks since you've received anything new from me. I apologize for this, but unfortunately, the job that I took a few months ago has been keeping me incredibly busy. This should resolve itself in a few weeks, but my episodes could be a little sporadic in coming out, so I do ask that you bear with me. Now, I know you're used to me putting out all kinds of spooky and twisty tales during the Halloween month. Unfortunately, I just didn't have that kind of time this year. But I do have a story for you for tonight. I'll leave it up to you to decide if it's a trick or a treat. So happy Halloween, excursionists. And I look forward to seeing you all out there on that twisted path. Are you ready? Welcome to Into the Night. I'm Nari, your guide on today's excursion down a twisted path. Be careful not to get lost. Be it dark or light, it's easy to lose your way. Are you ready? Then let's begin. The Farmer's Daughter. The cackling of the hens in the tidy red coop made the girl smile. The morning was filled with buzzing bees and flitting butterflies, and an earthy smell blew through the breeze. The thunder and lightning of the night before were nowhere to be found, and the sun shone brightly. Thick dew dampened her pink cloth sneakers, but nothing could dampen Annie Parker's spirits. Her pace quickened as she skipped toward the coop with a basket swinging from one hand and a bucket of cracked corn from the other. Reaching the door, she stopped and listened to the flock clucking their egg song while they set about their daily duty of laying the cream-colored ovals Annie was responsible for gathering each morning. She opened the door, and the birds rushed out into the poultry yard. A few late layers scrambled to finish their business so they could join the others. "Hello, girls," Annie said as she tossed handfuls of corn onto the ground. "Oh, and you too, Roscoe. I hadn't meant to leave my handsome rooster out." He crowed in response and flapped his wings in an aristocratic manner. "You sure think you're big stuff, don't you?" She giggled as he held his head up high. Roscoe strutted around the hens, presumably to supervise them. His red comb and wattles stood out in the bright contrast to the black and white feathers that ruffled in the slight breeze. "You silly boy. The girls are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. You just go on and eat. Let me worry about supervising." Annie walked among the hens, calling each one by name as she spoke softly. "Clementine, you're looking good. And you, Eleanor, you're so pretty." The barred rock hen looked up at her wistfully, then returned to pecking the ground and scratching the dirt with kicking feet. Eleanor held a special place in the girl's heart. Some people might find her silly for talking to her birds, but Annie believed they understood her and loved her as much as she loved them. Annie looked out across the farm. The rolling hills of the pasture waved in splotches of yellow and white daisies against the green grass. A blue heron flew to stop on the bank of the pond, located at the base of the hill that sloped downward from the large Yankee barn. "I'll never stop loving this place, no matter how old I become." The ruins of the old family log cabin, where her great-grandfather was born over a century ago, stood on the top of the hill going up the other side from the pond. She took great pride in those broken-down logs. Annie knew her roots grew deep in this piece of land. She could feel it. Generations of Parkers and Hillmans lived and died on the 300 acres that she loved with all of her heart. Sometimes, she swore she caught a glimpse of her ancestors going about their daily work on the farm. She knew that wasn't possible, but it comforted her all the same. "Annie, are you done collecting the eggs?" her mother called from the back porch. Looking at the empty basket, she knew she needed to get busy. "Not yet, Mama. I'm getting them now." "Sorry, girls," she said to the hens as she cut through their crowd while they scratched. "I need to gather your eggs. I'll be out to see you again later, though." She giggled as Henrietta and Hazel, two Rhode Island Reds, chased each other about trying to claim ownership of one large earthworm currently in possession of the big Wyandotte Clementine. "Many people in the cities wouldn't understand why I enjoy this so much, but I wouldn't trade this for anything." At 13, Annie embraced her heritage as a farmer's daughter. Still young enough to feel carefree, she was old enough to appreciate the advantages she had living in the country. Her younger brothers, Levi and Emmett, ages 4 and 6, only knew their days were filled with fun and adventure. Someday, they too would understand the magic of Parker Farms. She carefully gathered the eggs from the hay-filled nest boxes, then walked gently to the farmhouse so she didn't crack any of her cargo. She climbed the steps to the back porch, opened the screen door, and walked across the porch into the back entrance of the kitchen. "Here you go, Mama. I'm sorry I'm late." "You're fine, Annie. You aren't late. Besides, I know you enjoy spending time with your birds. The only reason I called you when I did is because Daddy is going into town and thought you might want to join him." "Really?" "Yes. He's going to the feed store and running a few other errands. If you want to go, you need to scoot. He's waiting for you at the truck." Her mother chuckled quietly as her daughter raced out of the house to join her father, who stood in the shade of the oak tree next to the truck. That old red Chevrolet was her father's favorite. His father owned it before him, and Gene Parker babied and cared for it almost as well as if it was one of his prized dairy cows. "Climb on in, Annie girl. I have a plan." For many years, she'd been the only child of Ada and Gene Parker before her brothers arrived much later. She'd grown up as her father's farmhand and her mother's gardening assistant. Annie loved the outdoors, and she loved going on special outings like the one today. "Mama said you're going to the feed store. Are we getting more grain?" "Well, yeah, but that's not all." Annie looked at him expectantly. "You'll just have to see when we get there, won't you?" He grinned and ruffled her hair. Trying to anticipate what her father had in mind gave her a couple of possible answers, but each time he told her she'd have to wait and see. Her excitement made the 20-minute drive seem like an hour. Finally, they pulled into the parking lot of the MFA feed store that she'd gone with him to since she was a toddler. "Well, howdy, Annie and Gene. What can I do for you today?" Joe stopped stocking the work gloves on the shelves and stepped out from behind the counter. "I need 500 pounds of your cattle feed, 100 pounds of cracked corn for Annie's chickens, and let's see. Seems like there was something else I came here for." "Daddy, you said you had a plan." Joe winked at Gene. "Oh, that's right, Annie. I think your dad did mention something to me just the other day. Now, what was it?" Annie fidgeted, and both men smiled at her. "Okay, I won't keep you in suspense. Come back with me here." Gene led her through the rows of farm supplies to the back corner. "Well, looky what they have here." He pointed at a square box, about 2 feet wide on both sides and 6 inches tall. Annie's eyes flew open. "An incubator? You're getting an incubator?" She jumped up and down in delight. "Now, Gene, what would you ever do with an incubator?" Joe stepped behind them and winked at them. "Here, let's go ahead and get these too while you're at it. You'll need them in about a month." In his hands, he held a heat lamp and a bag of chick starter. "Really, Daddy? I get to hatch some chicks from my girls?" "Yes, it seems like a good project for you, and you're old enough to be responsible. You'll need to keep the temperature and humidity just right, so you'll need to read the instructions. Plus, it will take you about a week to collect enough eggs to fill the incubator. Looks like you've got yourself a project." Annie hugged her father. "Thank you, Daddy." "I figured you'd begged for one long enough, and this year you can have one. Your mom is saving today's eggs for you, so in a week you can put this to good use." Annie felt like it was Christmas. "Can I keep them?" "Yes, you can keep all of them that you want to. You can also sell any that you don't want to keep at the farmer's market. You should be able to get $3 a chick." Annie looked at the box. The incubator held 60 eggs, and her eyes grew wide. "Wow," was all that she could say. Gene paid for the grain and the incubator, loaded their purchases into the truck, and then pulled away. When he turned toward home, Annie said, "Don't you need to do other errands?" "Nope. I didn't even need the grain yet. We came to town to get your incubator before they sold out of them. Joe gave me a call this morning to let me know they were in." Annie clutched the box that took up her entire lap and then some. "Dad, this is the best gift I have ever gotten." Her father didn't stop smiling the entire drive home. Annie carefully carried her treasured box into the house and couldn't stop talking about her excitement. Once she had it opened and the box emptied, she read the instruction manual over and over. She only took breaks to eat, do her chores, and spend time with her flock. "Roscoe, you're going to be a daddy!" The rooster seemed unaffected by the news and continued scratching in the dirt. Rewarded by whatever treats he found, He appeared happy without the stress of impending parenthood miring him down. "I'd hoped you'd been a little more excited, Roscoe Rooster." That night, she was awakened by another thunderstorm. The lightning flashed and the thunder rattled the glass in her bedroom window. Levi woke up crying from the storm, and Annie heard her mother walk to the boys' room and comfort them. "It's okay. It's just a storm. Nothing to worry about." Ada Parker stayed with her sons until they fell back asleep, and then she crept down the hall and went back to bed herself. The next morning at breakfast, Ada poured Jean a cup of coffee. Bleary-eyed, she yawned and said, "That was some lightning last night." "Really? I hadn't noticed." Jean winked playfully at his wife, who gently slapped him on the shoulder. Annie chewed a bit of toast. "It's the worst lightning we've had in a long time. I hope it didn't hurt the animals." "Don't worry, Annie girl. I already went out and checked on all of them. The animals were fine, thankfully." Jean took a bite of his bacon and then washed it down with a sip of coffee. "That was quite the storm, though. The night before wasn't much better. That's why I don't trust weathermen. They didn't predict storms either night." "Mama, I'm done with breakfast. Can I go check on my chickens and gather eggs?" "You sure can. Remember, do not put the eggs in the refrigerator. I have a basket on the countertop for you to put the eggs in for your incubator." Annie hopped up from the table and ran to the coop with her basket and a bucket of corn for her beloved birds. Pleased to see that the hens laid more than they normally did, she brought her trove of eggs back to the house after spending time checking on each member of the flock. For the next 5 days, she repeated the routine, and each day she watched the basket of eggs fill, from which she would soon fill her incubator as it sat on the kitchen counter. Each night storms raged, but no damage came from them. "Thank goodness there hasn't been any hail. That would wipe out a cornfield." Jean tinkered with the tractor as he talked with his daughter. "I remember back when I was a boy, we lost our entire crop one year to hail, and your grandma's garden was beaten to heck too." "What did you do?" "There wasn't much we could do. We had to tighten our belts and hope the next year we could do better. That was a lean year." That afternoon, once the incubator was heated to the correct temperature and reached the right level of humidity, Annie placed the eggs pointy side down on the rack inside the incubator. "Mark the calendar on the wall and count exactly 21 days from today, Annie. That's when your babies will hatch." Ada handed her a pencil to use to count off the days. "Remember to keep the humidity right so the chicks develop the way they should." "I will, Mama. I've read the instructions over and over." She squeezed her mother's hand. "Thank you for letting me do this. I know you could use the eggs to cook with, and it means a lot that you're letting me hatch my chicks." Ada hugged her daughter. "You are so welcome, honey. When I was a little girl, I hatched chicks too, and I enjoy the love you have for farming and your chickens." Days seemed to drag, but Annie checked off the days on the calendar one by one. The storm subsided, and not a drop of rain fell in 3 weeks. Now drought, not hail, was the concern for her father. "We sure don't need the pasture and crops to burn up. Hay will be sky high this winter if we can't grow more than one cutting this summer." Jean scanned the horizon for a hint of any cloud while he worked near the milk barn one afternoon. "I know you're worried, Daddy. It'll be okay." "I know. I don't want you to worry about it. You have exciting things coming up. Your chicks should be about ready to hatch." "I heard one peeping through the shell earlier." "You'd better go check on them. You don't want to miss the big event." Not until nighttime did the eggs begin to hatch. Annie sat on the floor, peering through the plastic window at the top of the incubator. One by one, tiny beaks pecked through the shells. But Annie's excitement turned to fear when the young burst forth. She recoiled when she saw. What are you? You aren't chicks." The naked gray bodies of strange creatures writhed in the warm incubator. While they had beaks, wings, and clawed feet, they scarcely resembled a chick in any other way. To Annie's horror, they batted their eyes at her and smiled, revealing hideous teeth, otherwise hidden inside their beaks. Their eyes seemed humanoid, and sparse clumps of hair were scattered across their bodies. The largest one spoke first. "No, Annie Parker, we aren't chicks, but you've been kind enough to hatch our eggs. Too bad you thought we'd be chickens." The creatures laughed. "It's too bad you think your chickens are really chickens too. We've been waiting for a time like this. Our expeditionary forces have lived on this planet for decades, knowing our opportunity to rise up and conquer Earth would arrive. No, there is no way this is real. Annie shook and rocked back and forth. We are very real. Our ship transported us down to Earth in what you thought were thunderstorms. We slowly colonized Earth with each storm, and our numbers became sufficient for our leaders to send young down to hatch. You've been kind enough and enthusiastic enough to assist us in our invasion. That was nothing but a thunderstorm. This isn't happening. That was no thunder and lightning you heard. It was the sound of your doom. What do you mean? Tears welled up in her eyes. You'll find out soon enough. You and the rest of the people on this planet. You, Annie, are quite lucky, however. How? The creature looked past her, smiled, and nodded at what was behind her. At that moment, she heard an impatient pecking on the window of the room. A tall creature, black and white, with a red comb and wattles, glared at her through the glass, flapping its wings in an aristocratic manner. Roscoe, no longer the sweet rooster she thought she owned, now watched over Annie, his new pet, as his fellow aliens began their triumphant rise to power. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Into the Night Anthology podcast. Written by Caroline Giamanco, narrated by Nari Kwak. Theme music by Nico Rodriguez. All other original music, sound design, and editing by Omenhawk Studios. You can find our links in the show notes. Into the Night is on your favorite podcatcher, so make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review to help other excursionists to join us. I'll see you next time. And remember, whether in the shadows or in the daylight, all twisted paths lead you into the night. Into the Night Anthology is a Creative Typo Entertainment production.